It's Bob. Welcome back to my channel. Today I actually wanted to talk about living in Miami Beach and some of the pros and cons of either moving here or living here. Um, I've lived here for 5 years. I live off of Lincoln Road, more toward the residential part of South Beach, and there's definitely a lot of inventory here in terms of places to live and specifically places to rent. And so, and then I moved here from Miami. So I've lived all over Miami, but for the past 5 years was the only time that I've actually lived in Miami Beach. So basically, for the first pro, I think what really differentiates living in Miami Beach to living in Miami is the fact that, particularly in South Beach, it's very centralized. So I think when you visit cities, either around the world or in the US or wherever, some cities are very central. So they have a city center and you can walk places and you can pretty much do all of the main things you need to do, be it do your groceries, go to the doctor, all that kind of stuff within walking distance. So basically I would consider that, somewhere where you may not need a car. So there's very few places in Miami where you can kind of get away with not having a car, and South Beach is definitely one of them. So that's definitely a strong pro. However, if you do have a car, you're going to run into one of the cons, particularly if you don't actually live and work in South Beach. So if you're thinking of moving to Miami Beach, but you have a job downtown or in Coral Gables or Kendall or Doral, that might be a challenge because getting in and out of the beach can sometimes be a nightmare, particularly when there's events. So, and construction. So right now there's lanes blocked on the 395 this past year, which is one of the causeways to go in and out of South Beach. And the other causeway, which is actually a toll, which, by the way, the Venetian is about over $2 to get in and out of the Venetian Causeway, which is kind of pricey already if you have a car. And then the Venetian was closed for about almost a year, I think, last year for construction. So there's constantly construction. When I moved here, all of Alton Road and West Avenue were under construction. So that was a nightmare. I'm not sure if it's gonna continue. So for right now, the 395, the MacArthur Causeway to get in and out of South Beach does have issues leaving the beach. So again, if you have a 9 to 5 and you're gonna be in the rush, chances are you may either need to pay a toll at the Venetian, go all the way up to the Julia Tuttle, or sit in traffic at the end of Alton Road here while they work on the 395. Now, back to the pros. So one of the pros that for me is really important is the diversity. So Miami in general is pretty segregated until you get to the more transient touristy areas like South Beach and parts of Brickell and downtown. And Wynwood, and I can go on, there's a few different, Miami's pretty big in general, Miami-Dade County. But here in South Beach, it's very diverse. You hear many different languages. There's people of all ethnicities. So in that sense, if you're kind of afraid of a culture shock, you won't necessarily experience the culture shock as much here because you can generally find people that either speak your same language. There's different places. There's a lot of, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but there's some, places to eat for, many different types of foods and stuff like that. So that's, I think, definitely one of the strong suits of Miami Beach. However, one of the cons I just mentioned is that it is very transient. So at the same time, it's like you can walk around the same way you would in, the city center of like a small town, but it's so transient. A lot of people here live here a few months out of the year. A lot of people, aren't permanently here. A lot of people are visiting. So that can become a challenge when you want to kind of set up roots and have, be social and kind of be more long-term. I think that's more of a challenge here in Miami Beach, so that is definitely something to consider. However, one of the pros is there is a lot to do. So at the same time, the reason that there's a lot of transient people here and people visiting is because there's events, there's, you know, a lot of different stuff that takes place in Miami Beach, and so that's kind of a draw for somebody. So if you've come and visited and you've come to, you know, Food and Wine, or, you know, any different type of either festival or programming here in the beach, that's the really good thing, that when you live here, yeah, the traffic is terrible that weekend, but if you stay in here, you know, you can enjoy the stuff without having to drive in and out. So that's a really good aspect of that. However, the con associated with all the fun here is spring break and Airbnb. So you're not supposed to technically Airbnb here. People still do. So you could be in your apartment, you could be totally fine. And then come, you know, February, March, and April, you might be woken up at 2 a.m. by, you know, fraternity and sorority people, you know, singing at the top of their lungs, screaming at each other, having relationship issues in your hallway, in your apartment building. That sort of thing does happen in those months, and it's not something to look forward to. So if you like peace and quiet, this is definitely not the area you should consider moving to. But one of the things that has really kept me here, even through the craziness of spring break and all that, is the affordability. So in terms of the rental market, and I'm not a real estate person, but I do have looked around over the past few years to see if I'm really getting value out of what I pay rent here. And I would say 100% hands down, I absolutely am. I have affordable rent here. I really haven't had any issues with where I live for the most part. And there is a lot of inventory, much more, I think, here in South Beach than anywhere else in South Florida, where you get a lot of stuff for your money. You know, so in other parts of Miami, you may be very far away from where you work. You know, you may have to sit in traffic a lot. You may be in an area that's just like any other suburb in the US with just strip malls and, you know, houses and stuff like that. So I think here in Miami Beach, you really do get a bang for your buck, and there is actual inventory, and not just like on like Zillow and apartments.com and all that. Like if you actually walk down South Beach, for example, there's a lot of people that just the owners rent directly. And that's actually where you usually get the best deal. That's a really good tip. That's how I got the deal on my apartment, was because I knew somebody in the building. So as soon as something became available, I immediately jumped on it. And so I think that's why I have an affordable rent here in a really good area. And then the final con, which is a big one, especially now with global warming, is it's a flood zone. So the work that I was mentioning before that they did on Alton and West Avenues was to mitigate the flooding issue. So actually on my street where I live, I don't have flooding. I did evacuate in the last hurricane. I don't remember what it was a year ago, what the name was, but when I came back, I didn't have any water damage. I didn't even necessarily need to get a sandbag, which is good because I didn't. But yeah, however, 2 blocks away, it was completely inundated and you couldn't even get out on the sidewalk. So it's more like what you see on CNN when they're covering these hurricanes. So there are areas that you could rent in South Beach that you could be totally flooded. Your car could get full of water. You know, again, I'm lucky in the sense that I live on just one of the streets that has actually been fixed. But again, 2 blocks away, it's horrible. And then even further, closer to the hotels and stuff like that, it also still gets really bad with the flooding. So you definitely would want to take that into consideration, especially given that there's a lot more hurricanes now. Hopefully, you know, there won't be too many, but nonetheless, the rain and the flooding could be an issue for you. But overall, I would say that the pros for me so far have outweighed the cons. Again, I live in South Beach, so I'm able to pretty much walk for everything that I need, including stuff like, you know, again, like doctors, dentists, eye doctors. So any type of appointment and all that, you can kind of very much keep it local. You can keep your life local. And the good thing I would say here too, if you do know people in Miami, it is kind of fun to be the one that has, you know, an apartment in the beach, because you could also host people, you know, so have people drive in and, you know, maybe have dinner, have cocktails, and it's kind of like, you know, you can there's a lot of stuff that you could do here also socially. So it's kind of, you know, it has its, certainly has its cons, but I would definitely say that the good outweighs the bad. And yeah, I would say really it's generally a pretty good value proposition, especially if you're moving to Miami for the first time. I would say if you're not from here, South Beach would be a good place to start. And then you can kind of slowly figure out, Miami's very big. So there's a lot of different areas with a lot of different cultures and a lot of different things to do. So, but I think that, again, especially if you don't have transportation, this is a good place to start and to go figuring out, you know, if you like it here. I would say that, again, it's not somewhere to understand Miami culture. It's much more international and diverse. So if you really want to understand Miami, I would definitely go more to the mainland. But if you want more, I would say quality of life and bang for your buck, I would probably consider moving to South Beach.